everyone, kaosnova here, and this is Battle Angel Alita Commentary, Episode 4, The Legend of Excalibur. Excalibur is the sword of legend, the sword of kings, made by divine power, and whoso obtains the sword shall be king. You're probably wondering, okay, what does some futuristic sci-fi manga have to do with Excalibur? Well, interesting enough, Excalibur is a major inspiration for a lot of the events that unfold in Battle Angel Alita, and this includes the original series, this includes Last Order, and possibly Mars Chronicle. We'll see. But this is talking about how much of a role this myth plays within the manga and the overarching plot. There's a lot of spoilers, so I warned you. And whoso obtains the sword shall be king. You're probably wondering, okay, what does some futuristic sci-fi manga have to do with Excalibur? Well, interesting enough, Excalibur is a major inspiration for a lot of the events that unfold in Battle Angel Alita, and this includes the original series, this includes Last Order, and possibly Mars Chronicle. We'll see. But this is talking about how much of a role this myth plays within the manga and the overarching plot. There's a lot of spoilers, so I warned you. The story of Excalibur is tragic, magical, and the root is from the Welsh word of Caledwich, or hard breach cleft. Excalibur is meant to be made a magical sword made of very fine steel that cannot break like most swords of the time. Given how the quality of steel was in medieval times, people really respected well-made steel. Excalibur is supposedly divinely enchanted, and according to the myths of Excalibur, King Arthur, people could easily slice steel as if it was wood. It was drawn from a lake, or in the case to confirm Arthur as the heir of Arthur Pendragon, it was drawn out of a stone. After it was forced in, and supposedly people could not draw it, no matter how strong they were, except for Arthur as a very young man. Excalibur is meant to be an irretrievable item, and if it is retrieved, it is miraculous, and the miracle of a person retrieving Excalibur shows that they are worthy to be king, worthy to reign. Alita herself, while is an important catalyst in a lot of these events in the plot, so like I said before, there are spoilers in this. Now, to get into the basic myth, they had Arthur Pendragon, the heir of Excalibur, after the death of his father Arthur Pendragon. Arthur lost Excalibur because he could not keep it. While he had it, he became unworthy to keep the sword due to some of his unsavory actions. Merlin therefore took Arthur from him and gave him to another knight, Hector, to be raised by the knight instead of his father. The sword Excalibur was plunged into a stone or an anvil, depending on the variation of the myth you've heard, and seemingly impossible to be pulled out. Whoever could pull the sword from the stone could be king. There is an Arthur in the Battle Angel Alita story, and we'll get into that with Last Order. He was called Arthur Farrell, an Irishman who lived in North America at the time in what would be to us is the near future. In the original Battle Angel Alita series before Last Order, before Mars Chronicle, there was symbolism and events carried over from the Legend of Excalibur. One of these is that in the Legend of Excalibur there originally was an heir. The heir was Destinova. He was exiled for doing some really horrible things. Destinova was not naturally born, but his son, named Kaos, somehow was. His son, named Kaos, would ultimately become the ruler in the future. But his son initially was off in the Badlands and never wanted to come back to live in the city that at some point he felt rejected in there. He ultimately took the call after Alita found him. Similar to the son of Arthur, Destinova took a role similar to Mordred in that he sought to destroy his quote-unquote father, or his creator, Melchizedek, the artificial intelligence which controlled Zalem. The role of Mordred also has parallels in Den versus Kaos. Den calls upon Kaos to embrace with him at last, and in a climactic final scene, Den draws his spear towards the projected quantum energy form of Kaos, as if to kill him. And he also borrows a similar quote from Mordred in the final battle of Excalibur, when Den asks to embrace at last and tells Kaos that Kaos is the father of Den, which in the essence Den spawned as a intelligence or entity from the anger of Kaos at the world's hatred of him. Den in that essence became like Mordred in the sense that he was made to suffer for the sins of Kaos, his hatred. So, Arthur Farrell is different, and this story of Arthur Farrell came about with the retcon into Last Order. He's some ways similar to Arthur Pendragon in the sense that he helped invent Excalibur. Excalibur was a encrypted system for using the ultimate weapons. Using such ultimate weapons in space and on Earth could prove a type of victory. However, Arthur died with no apparent heir. So, there was the Gene Project. With the Gene Project, they sought to artificially make children of Arthur, one of whom, and the only living son of Arthur Farrell, is Destinova. Now, that also makes Kaos the son of Destinova, Kaos the grandson of Arthur, even with the retcon. Now, there is Excalibur in this case, and it was an encoding. Like I said before, it was an encryption to gain access to the ultimate weapons. And it was apparently lost. Apparently it was lost, but you see, Kaos has a special ability that he can get, but ordinary people cannot acquire. The ability is known as psychometry, and interestingly enough, it is a trait commonly associated with Dampier's or other half-vampire characters, such as Blade, Vampire Hunter D. And it's electromagnetic in nature in the sense that he reads data from people and objects just as if a computer hard drive reads the magnetic data from the old spinning hard disks. In that essence, it is fully possible, and even in the original series, Kaos can literally memorize information that is broadcast to him, or which he reads off items or even people from them. It's conceivable that if someone had a memory of what the code of Excalibur was, or the fight of Morgana, Kaos could extract the matching data out of that person and use it. So this isn't officially happened at all, and I don't know if they want to continue with if Kishiro's intent is even to continue with this Excalibur myth in Mars Chronicle. I don't know, probably not. The crazy part is that there is someone, the grandson of Arthur Farrell, who could potentially do that. And maybe if the Consular War, an incident involving the General and Erica continues on Mars to get even worse, there may be a means to get Excalibur and resolve it, using the ultimate power of Excalibur by accessing the ultimate weapons with the necessary codes. The Fata Morgana, which is the corresponding piece of code, was had by the last surviving vampire, Cerula Sanguis or Vilma Fakiri. Now, this is getting longer, but interestingly enough, she has, again, the corresponding pieces in her earrings and holographic data. She gave it to Alita in Last Order, which is stored inside Alita's head. So, the matching code is in Alita now, and not the one who's left behind on Earth, but the one who's on Mars as an agent of Melchizedek. But that didn't stop the organization known as Ladder from wanting to recreate Arthur's heirs, which was Destiny Nova and others in the Gene Project, although Destiny Nova is the only one of the Gene Project left alive. Now, going back to Excalibur and some of the myths, Arthur killed an entire shipload worth of children because he didn't want anyone who was born on May Day to potentially be his enemy. Well, guess who the survivor of the May Day massacre by Arthur was? His own son, born of incest to the sorceress Lady Morgana, or Morgan Le Fay. So, and in a way, this isn't incest that created Destiny Nova, but it is artificial means of having his body assembled by machine, genetically coded and grown by machine, and a method comparable to Kryptonians in DC Comics or the artificially grown babies in the Matrix franchise. So, in essence, the incest of this case is quite likely the fact that Destiny Nova was not born, he was grown, as were the others in the Gene Project. But Destiny Nova, or at least his clones, are the only living possible heirs. And in this case, Nova X is on ice, and the Nova still left alive is called Supernova. He's got that little frog going. And he also has multiple chips in his head, or multiple brains worth of processing power. But going back to the myth and the psychometry explanation I've gone through earlier, Kaos might be able to do the impossible if the intention of Yukito Kishiro is to continue the Excalibur myth. He could literally have the potential to do the impossible by getting the data out of, if he found a reason to extract it from Alita or the Alita on Mars or Cerula Sanguis if he encounters either of them. Now, going back to Arthur Farrell, yes, King Arthur had incest with his half-sister, Morgan Le Fay or Lady Morgana. Arthur Farrell, likewise, did not have an heir through ordinary means either. His wife was killed by Victor Byron, the now dead husband of Cerula Sanguis, before her death in evolution. or near death, I should rather say. With that death and the seemingly lost Excalibur code, Gene, Prodigy, and Ladder wanted to have a replication of the power of Excalibur, so they decided to artificially make heirs to Arthur Farrell with the Gene Project, growing those those Matrix babies, or those artificially built fetuses grown by machine, not born but grown. And that includes Destiny Nova. Although the interesting part here is that while Destiny Nova is a psychopath, pretty much a complete monster, his son doesn't appear to be that way. And his son was implied to be naturally born and a mutant. But either way, his son would appear to be much more worthy and much more someone you would give Excalibur to than Destiny Nova. An interesting similar moment to the 1981 film Excalibur and Battle Angel Alita comes in the original series in terms of the relationship between Den of Barjack and Kaos, or Kaosnova if you actually go by his true name. Den offers the opportunity to embrace him at last to Kaos, and he ultimately considers Kaos to be his father. Den is also the vessel, or essentially depository, for all of Kaos' sins of inaction and hatred. In that sense, it goes back to the symbolic moment from Excalibur where Arthur talks about how Mordred became the vessel of his sins in the film. And similar to him being delivered, finding re-motivation through receiving the Holy Grail, Kaos also receives an encouragement to continue in Battle Angel Alita and ride out once more to address the issue of Den and the Barjack rebellion which Den had founded with the help of Destiny Nova. And in this sense, it's very similar to Arthur and Mordred in the fact that, also like Excalibur or the tragic story, they both essentially cause each other's death. As we see in Excalibur, Mordred in the film, 1981 film, is largely portrayed as riding on a horse with a lance and a mask. And Den is, while this is more of a Japanese traditional weapons and armor that Den wears, he is portrayed as riding on a horse with a naginata spear, a traditional cavalry weapon for feudal Japan. And in that sense, it leads, with all these similarities, leads one to wonder if Yukito Kishiro took some inspiration from the 1981 film Excalibur, and with the time frame of being 12 years before this Barjack story really came into fruition, and around 1981 when Excalibur hit the theaters, it's very much a possibility. Something to think about also in the Excalibur story is that Arthur had his son
Mordred through incest with his half-sister Morgana. And in that sense, Kaos is similar to the Excalibur version of Arthur because he inadvertently created an artificial intelligence known as Den with an altered personality where his hatred was channeled. He didn't knowingly make Den, but Den came about through the nature of Kaos and his origin as a mutant. And it's from this time and at this climactic end of the Badlands story that Kaos and Den both die. They both contribute to each other's demise. Den symbolically thrusts the spear through the quantum energy projection, or rather the holographic projection of Kaos, in a symbolic gesture similar to Mordred thrusting the spear through Arthur. And in that same moment, Kaos helps bring about the end of Den and how he dies by destroying the weapons of Zalem through mental willpower, and then ultimately, he doesn't stop or allow the military protecting Iron City or the scrapyard from delivering some kill shots to Den. And Den meets his end, sitting on the cables or freight tubes up to Zalem. But ultimately, when you see Kaos being woken up by Alita and leaving the type of prison that was the Granite Inn, or formerly the NORAD headquarters in Colorado, he's not the Kaos you knew anymore. He's a new person. Because the Kaos you knew and the Den you knew both died, so there's a totally new person in place of both of them. In that sense, the new king arises and comes to take his role as the heir and the king of both Zalem and the surface scrapyard in the end of the original series. Now, while this was retconned, it nonetheless is still an interesting story with many parallels to the idea of a new king coming to claim inheritance from an old disunited kingdom that Excalibur, as a myth of King Arthur, portrayed.
In the manga panels portraying the final charge of Den, Latin words are transcribed on the pages. These words are the lyrics of Carmina Burana, the song played in the 1981 film Excalibur, during Arthur and the knights riding out to their final battle in the film. In that same sense that Arthur and the knights were riding into their final battle, Den of the Barjack makes his final battle with Teferis or Zalem. Also comparable to Excalibur is that in the final battle of Den, both Den and Kaos die, as did both Mordred and Arthur. But with the actual Latin lyrics of the song Carmina Burana spelled out on the page, it couldn't be any more explicit that the saga of Den and Kaos took inspiration from Excalibur.
In the end, Alita becomes essentially like a type of knight in this story, bringing back the Holy Grail to Kaos and ensuring that Zalem did not collapse. And in that conclusion, she's important, as was Percival, in bringing back the Holy Grail. At the end of this thing, the myth of Excalibur and how it works in the Battle Angel mythos is immense. And one of the other parts about this that is interesting is in the film. Destinova in the film is already up in Zalem. He apparently has never been exiled. But an interview with Leda Kitagridis indicates that she and Cameron and Rodriguez were quite aware of the existence of Destinova's mutant child. And their idea and concept, and I'll include a link to the description down there, was that Destinova would be looking for his kid and wants him back. In that sense, it changes the roles of Destinova being the one that Alita would be trying to capture alive in the Toon project to Destinova's son. And my guess is, since Destinova in the film is portrayed as a genetic purist, he initially exiled his child for being a mutant, but now he wants him back, seeing as how he can use him to get Excalibur and the encryption thereon. Either way, at the end, the mythos of Excalibur is a heavy dose of inspiration for Yukio Kishiro in crafting the story, and many elements of that myth are in it. And it's been a nice time talking to you, and the next Battle Angel Alita Commentary topic will be discussing the terraforming wars and the fall and how the two are different. I would also recommend checking out my live stream, What's the Difference, talking about 3 different media presentations of Battle Angel Alita and how they all differ. Meantime, I want to say thank you to our audience, and I wish you all have a wonderful day and hope you enjoyed this wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, and I'll be signing off.